my first introduction to you actually was, I asked you why you chose Andy, or like, what did you love about Andy? And then you said two different responses, one of which was not bad, but a little outrageous. And I may not repeat it on the podcast.
She stalked him?
No.
What was it? You can repeat it. I can't imagine I would.
I don't know if I should.
Wow. Jennifer, what did you say?
It was nothing bad.
Wow.
It was just...
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know what that could have been.
All I know is that you stalked him for many years before.
10, I
think
believe.
Stalk is a really strong word.
That's the words you used when you told me.
That's what it did say that on the report, on the restraining order. That was in the restraining order.
On the other side was the marriage license.
One time Andy and I were just friends. We were hanging out and I was like, we were just friends at this time. I had a huge crush on him. He had a huge crush on one of my friends. And we're just talking about, how do you know when it's the one? How do you know when you've met the one? How do you know? And I asked him, I go, how do you think you'll know it's the one? And Andy said, I never really think about if I found the one. I want to spend my life becoming the one for someone else.
Wow.
And I was like,
that's deep.
I was so, thank you so much. And I just to like my knees were weak and I'd like wobble out of the
You're
conversation.
Wow, that's a man
I'm
right
like,
there.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. But they've been coming every week, every Thursday night to our house. So it's funny because now they also come to church.
What are you doing at your house? I don't think you've actually said what's happening. It's a Bible study for med center students, residents,
It
doctors?
started out like med students, but now it's really moved into professionals. Kids are working on their master's degrees.
Okay.
And it's a good group and it's great discussion. But I've gotten to know them and it's funny because like I was limping pretty bad at church, and Gage literally did like an evaluation of my knee right outside.
That's your perfect friend.
In the vestibule.
It's a perfect connection. Is free medical advice. She wants free medical advice and free law
there
advice.
Engaged, they're just standing over my leg as people are walking by. Hey, Miss Jennifer. Like,
wow.
Speaking of doctors, like I did walk up to a doctor and I think I told you guys this. I just pointed to this part of my stomach and I go, this keeps hurting. She goes, yeah, you're constipated. I was like, thanks. That was fast.
Yeah. That's probably fast. Like the most likely diagnosis.
Yeah, it was really funny.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Well, now that we know that you're constipated,
I'm
do you
not
want to
anymore.
go? Oh, you're not anymore. Okay.
Well, I don't even know if that's worse.
You want to get started?
Yes, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Almost Amazing podcast from the City Rise Network. Hosted by Jennifer Dennis and produced by me, Justin Kello. We're a podcast that was supposed to be focused on parenting, but we've kind of lost the plot along the way. Honestly, we don't know what this podcast is about, but we talk to incredible people who love Jesus, and our hope is to provide encouragement and fun whenever possible. If our lack of clear direction bothers you, we apologize, but no one is making you listen to this podcast, unless you're married to Jennifer. Andy, thanks for listening.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Almost Amazing podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We have a fantastic show ahead, and I'm out of breath.
Wow,
I've got to do better.
It's the very beginning, and you already can't breathe.
I was going... You already can't breathe. Normally, it's by the end of the show that I need an oxygen tank to complete it. But I think this is going to be a fantastic show today. So thank you guys for joining us. Justin, have you been bitten by the spring bug? The weather is fantastic.
Well, I got bit by mosquitoes today because as soon as it warms up, mosquitoes are like, I'm in on that. Like they like to bite me.
Mosquitoes are the most dangerous animal.
I hate them. But before we get any further, if you're watching YouTube, please like this. I did. It's not about
a subliminal message.
It's not about spring, but I do want to share a funny story. So what people don't know is that like this is also my office that we're in. So like there's a whole side with like my desk and another couch where people can sit. And the other day after I was doing a review for one of the guys that I oversee, and he sat down on my couch and he like leaned and he's like, "Oh, what's this?" And he pulls out a scrunchie, which could be incriminating. I was like, this is my office, like it's a scrunchy switch. And I was like, oh, well, there was a teenage girl here yesterday. I was like, no, there were two teenage girls. I was like, no, we did a podcast, me and Jennifer, and we interviewed two teenage girls, and they were sitting on that couch.
They were all here together.
But I just like stumbled through this, like, I was like, just put it in the trash. I was like, just no. It's just like when you find a piece of women's clothing in a place where it shouldn't be, you're like, ah, so, but it was just a funny, like, stumble through to like, no, it was a podcast. Jennifer was here. Like, it's no big deal.
That's funny.
But
That is embarrassing.
As far as spring goes, I'm excited. It feels great. It'll feel great for 3 weeks, and it's going to be disgusting. But
We're trying to just soak in every day
Soak it
of
in.
cool
soak it
weather.
in. I
Soak it
mean,
in.
I eat lunch outside because if it's
perfect.
beautiful outside, I'm eating lunch outside. Like,
It
I
is
want to soak it up.
perfect.
And it's, you can do probably through April, the beginning of May, you can keep doing that, and then it kind of gets too hot.
So we are like knee deep in getting ready for the Easter egg hunt. I know this will come out
It's
of
already
Easter,
happened, yep.
after Easter.
It was great. Wasn't
It's
the
a
Easter egg
memory.
hunt great?
It was so good. But right now, it's just blowing up balloons.
Yeah.
We have 20,000 eggs.
But you have a full staff.
I have a full staff. They're all back.
Everyone is here.
And it's so happy. It's like a mom being back with all her kids. They're all
Mhm.
working and talking, and you're
Yep.
just like, I love these guys.
Yep.
And then getting ready for Easter Sunday itself, it's just a lot of prep. And that's the week that we're in. The glory of it is having the incredible honor of sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with our community.
Sure.
So there's no better way to spend our time. There's no better way. And so there's just a joyfulness of having us all back together. And that's what we're working on this week.
I mean, the Easter event by sheer volume of people is the largest event y'all do. Like, I know
It
VBS
is.
has a lot of kids and a lot of
Right.
people.
we have
but this-
about 1,200 people.
I was about to say, it is not only the largest thing our kids do, other than a worship service, it's the largest thing our church does. Like, it's
a big deal.
It's a very, very big deal. And it only kind of, I think, exploded in numbers when we moved to Evelyn's Park. Like, that really, to me, opened up the floodgates of like, oh, this is a community event. People drive by and they see it.
This year it's so funny coming out of COVID. It was really small. It was more intimate. And then the next years, it's just kind of stayed at this level until last year. It kind of took
Mhm.
it again busted forward.
Well, on the Facebook post that we paid to boost, I get a lot of just people tagging friends like, hey, you want to go? Hey, you up for it? Like, it's just a lot of
like
tagging.
we've had over 700 people.
Mm.
I think between 600 and 700 people like note, hey, we're interested.
Oh,
I mean,
cool,
that's
cool,
been
cool.
really crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know if you're getting that ad to more of a targeted group.
Mine's different. So mine's not the event; it's just an image, and so I don't know if y'all paid to boost y'all's. If you didn't pay to boost it, then it's just by word of mouth. But the way I do it is within 5 miles of the church, and it's like parents of whatever. Like, I really target parents.
Oh, that's good.
But like, it's a lot of people tagging saying, hey, you want to go to this?
Right. So we're looking forward to that. It's really good to be out with the community. It's really good to invite them to churches on Sunday. We always have a number come back. We even have people that are involved in our church now who got connected through the Easter egg hunt.
Mhm.
So I love the event.
You got saved at the Easter egg hunt last year. You did. That was
I
a
did.
big moment.
That was a lot of relief. Everybody's like, she's been a children's minister now for 6 years. It's about time. We have tons of candy. And last year we ran out. We made Andy go to Sam's in the middle of the whole day. We're like, Andy, just go get huge boxes of candy. Just bring back whatever you can.
Yeah.
No peanut butter.
I do recall that.
And so he ran, and this is so crazy. We bought a lot of candy,
Mhm.
but we'd run out of eggs. So last year we had people coming in. We're like, hey, if you will bring us your eggs that you've emptied out, bring us your empty eggs. And we had a group of people that was shoving candy into eggs on the screen before.
But then by the end of the day, y'all were just like taking bags of candy and just like,
well, that's
putting
the
it
whole
all
thing
on
is
the
just
ground.
dumping it out on the ground.
It wasn't even in eggs at a certain point. It was
But this
just
year we've
bags
gotten
of
a
candy.
lot more candy.
Yeah.
We've got a lot more eggs. And so
Mhm.
we're ready for the challenge.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is all posts. So this is all already happened.
I'm sure it went great.
It went great.
I'm sure
We
it was
loved
a
it.
great event. But no, it's worth talking about. It's what your week is about.
That's what the week is about, for sure. Anyway, but today, what I'm excited about today is that we're visiting with some guys who I have such a great respect for, and I just think of them so highly. So today is a really special episode. I know that I say that all the time. I say it all the time.
Every week.
This is an episode, no joke, that I've been thinking for over 2 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh.
Because every week, these two guys come to my house. They're part of a Bible study that takes place, a med student Bible study. I may have told you that. And they have now finished their 4th year of medical school.
Wait, how many years are there in medical school?
Well, we're about to find out. Please welcome Gage Hallbauer and Jared Stover. They are 4th year medical students.
Thanks for having
They
us.
they just got matched.
Wow.
Yes, and not on Tinder. Can you guys tell us about your match process and where you're headed?
Sure. So the match process is strange. It's almost like pledging a sorority or a fraternity. And it's for selection into residency. Residency is almost like your first baby doctor job. After you graduate from medical school, you're an MD or a DO, depending on the school you graduate from. But then in residency, you can prescribe medicines, but you're kind of operating under the license of a seasoned physician. And so depending on the kind of residency you go into, it changes the length. So dermatologist, ophthalmologist, radiologist, all go to the same medical school, and residencies where you specialize. But so the match process is you go on all your interviews to countries, it could be all across the country, to programs all across the country. And then you just rank them and say, this is the one I like most. This is the one I like second, while they're ranking you and all the other people that applied. And then there's this Nobel Prize winning algorithm that sorts people. And then on match day, you open up an envelope and that tells you which program you're going to.
Is it literally an envelope? Like we're talking
Yes,
like
at 11
a
a.m.
physical envelope.
Wow.
Everyone in the same room at the same time, unless you didn't match immediately. And then because you have to do this thing called soaping, which is like essentially a scramble to find an open spot. Otherwise, it's like match day. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm about to find out publicly where I go for residency. So,
Now you that wasn't the case for you because
No.
you had matched early.
yes. So I'm in the Navy and we match actually in December.
He matched with the United States of America.
Wow.
Indeed. Uncle Sam and me. And so ours is much less ceremonious, as is kind of fitting with the military. So for my match day, I was like, Mom, don't come down. Come down for the later one. So Gage was actually there with me on match day, and it was me and him waiting for an email at like about noon.
We drew up
December
a little
13th.
poster though that said like I match,
Yeah.
and like because there's all these photo ops on match day that we tried to replicate.
Mhm.
And where will you be headed?
To Naval Medical Center Portsmouth. So if you know
Okay.
like Norfolk or Virginia Beach, right there. So
Sure.
yeah. And
Do
the way
Oh, go ahead.
the way I like to describe matching, because often we'll go on away rotations, which is like for a month, we'll go visit somewhere we're interested in. It's kind of like dating or courting. So you're there with the residency program and you're kind of like fluffing your feathers, like showing them what you could do, like posturing, being like, oh yes, I'm very good at this. And then they're kind of looking at you like, and they're fluffing their feathers up. And then at some point you're kind of like nod your head, you're like, yeah.
This is
And
the
they're
place.
kind of like, yeah. And then when you match, you're like, you've always been the one. And then,
It was always you.
it was always you.
Now, is it true when you, and I know this is kind of true because I also know like Sarah and a few of our residencies, it can be pretty grueling residency process,
Yeah.
the experience.
Mhm.
Is it as bad as it is on the shows that we've all been watching?
Wait, y'all aren't residents yet though.
Correct.
So they
We'll
don't-
begin
Oh.
residency in July. My wife is halfway through her residency.
Okay. So where are you going?
I'm going to a family medicine program in Conroe.
Oh, well, that's
Just
not
an hour
that
north of
far at all. That's great.
Mhm. Yeah, it depends on your perspective. Residency is difficult no matter what residency you do, but I think you don't typically see residents on TV who are also Christians. And so I think if you're a Christian, you can have a very different experience during medical school, but also residency.
Mm.
So
They say that there's 2 times in your life that you sleep the least. One is when you have a new baby, and the other one is while you're a resident.
Mm.
Okay.
And some
so
people
the
think you
hours
can
are-
rip the Band-Aid off quickly by doing both at the same time.
those are
Getting
bold
a kid,
individuals.
No sleep and work all the time.
Right.
I could see that. I could see how that would pair up. Ooh, that'd be really awful.
Can't imagine.
Ugh, well,
Or a double blessing.
Oh.
yeah.
depends
Or
on your
look at you,
perspective.
Jared. I love this.
Yes.
Speaking of perspective, you guys have been able to really grow in your faith over the last few years.
Mhm.
How have you been able to do that? How have you maintained spiritual growth during this season?
Yeah, so I think it started for me actually when I first talked with Andy. So I came down here, I was totally alone. I didn't have any spiritual community, but I had been praying for some community for some time before I got down here. And then at some point, Andy asked me to help him lead the Bible study he was starting up on Thursdays. And then I took some time to pray about it, and I felt God saying, hey, Jared, this is where you really choose me in medical school or not. And really what it amounted to was surrendering my time to him, because the easiest excuse you can ever make in medical school is I don't have time, and people probably won't challenge you on it. But I think it's the biggest faux pas that you don't have time for your relationship with God in medical school. I think you're very able to make time. It's just going to cost in other areas. So for me, the biggest thing for growing in my faith was surrendering my time to God and saying, it's more valuable for me to spend 1 or 2 hours, at least one night a week, investing in my relationship with God and in community, as opposed to getting a little bit more studying in. So,
Yeah, my answer is actually very similar. That med school was the first time I took a step in trust that God knows what he's talking about when he talks about rest. So when I was in college, I did not sleep enough. And I would work 7 days a week and never felt like I had enough time, and would often struggle to have a like regular morning relationship with God, like being in the Word daily, and always had great church, but kind of my the discipline part of my faith walk was regulated to Sundays. But I had heard when I was in college that there are some crazy people, and they're probably just like super brilliant and med school is easy for them, but that actually take a Sabbath in med school. And then when I got to med school, they were talking about how we were going to work like 60 to 80 hours per week. And this is like, you're going to have 2 jobs and it's all going to be med school. And I was like, okay, what if I just did 60 hours a week, and 60 divides really nicely by 6 days? Wow, that's super convenient. So just like discovering the math, I've found that there was like a plausible way forward where I was going to work for 10 hours a day. I was going to sleep for 8 hours a day, and there were still 6 hours left over to do whatever I wanted.
Eating stuff.
To eat, right. Yeah. So I just started with this plan of, okay, let's just try that, where I'm going to have 6 hours, and part of that's going to be part of my quiet time in the morning, and I'm going to take a nap when I can. I'm going to read non-medical books, and I'm going to not do medical work for 24 hours on the weekends. And that gave me the freedom to really dive in on a morning quiet time that was regular, and to be in this Thursday evenings Bible study, and to find an awesome church and to plug in. And part of it was like, I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. I got into a competitive medical school, but I feel like I was the last one that they picked. I kind of scraped in off the wait list, and so I thought, well, if I'm going to be at the bottom of my class anyway, then I might as well not just destroy myself working. And what ended up happening, though, is because I was resting intentionally and was taking time off of studies, when I came back, I felt refreshed and excited about it. I never felt burned out or overloaded. And I felt like I had a lot more creativity about my studies than my classmates, and a lot more thankfulness for what I was learning. And I still remember dissecting out the supraspinatus for the first time, which is by far my favorite muscle.
Me too.
It sits.
You never forget that.
We are always saying that.
You never forget that.
The stupinatus. We love that thing.
It sits on top of the scapula in the supraspinous fossa.
Mm-hmm.
It's this nice little cove for this little cylindrical muscle to sit. It's responsible for the beginnings of abduction, which is when you move your arm out. It's part of the rotator cuff. So the classic rotator cuff injury is to the supraspinatus, and it just has like a very satisfying nerve innervation, and has a little subacromial bursa, like a little hat that it's wearing for protection. And sometimes that gets irritated, but you can inject it with steroids. I just remember finding this muscle and how simple it was, and how useful it was, and how devastating it is when it doesn't work and people can't lift their arm up anymore. And in the Baylor Anatomy Lab, I felt like God had hidden this little mystery just for me to find it, and I think the only reason I could even have low enough stress to have a thought like that is because God had inspired me to rest intentionally and to come back to work ready to go, instead of like a lot of my classmates waking up, working, and then going to bed 7 days a week.
That's such a good word. Go ahead, Jared.
Mhm. Yeah, I think to illustrate Gage's point of like, if you're willing to invest time in your relationship with God, the good that it does is he used to write these things called procrastiraps.
That's true.
And I to this day, I'll like occasionally pull it out and show somebody the rap he wrote, and he filmed it and he sent it to me. He's like, look what I just did. And it's like this beautiful, like just perfectly, I don't know how to describe it, harmonious rap about anatomy and faith and the challenges of medical school. But it's like, who does that during med school? And, but yeah, I think one word to describe what investing in your relationship with God also preserves during medical school, which I think describes Gage well, and I think describes me well, is wonder. I think on one of my interviews, I talked to one of the attendings I was interviewing with for residency interviews about the idea of wonder and how my faith preserves wonder at anatomy or at physiology or just the surgery. And having kind of that childlike curiosity. And this seemed novel to this woman. Like she hadn't thought about that in so long. And I was like, that's such a shame. Like I still have my mind blown. And I'm a fourth year medical student. Like usually that goes away for most people.
Right.
And
I love that. I think that there's lots of wisdom in that, because you do feel like to get better, you just have to try harder, stay up longer, put more hours in, dedicate more this way in this vein. But to actually say, no, I'm going to rest. I'm going to make myself do the 8 hours. I'm going to take time with the Lord, and I'm not going to turn it all over to the study, the endless study grind. It feels risky, but there's such great wisdom in it. And it seems to have really paid off.
Some of it required some radical stuff. Like if you're going to rest intentionally, that means you also have to work intentionally and without distraction. And I think resting intentionally prepares you for that. But I would notice that I'd be trying to work intentionally and I would get distracted on YouTube, and I would follow the rabbit trail. And then 2.5 hours later, I'd have burned through almost half of my 6 hours. And so when I began to lay out my time like a budget, I got to see how valuable that time of rest was. And so because of that, I have all these things blocked. I have YouTube blocked. I have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram blocked, Reddit blocked. And I did it for so that I could actually focus on my work. But I also did it because I realized that an hour where I spend 26 minutes napping and 34 minutes reading from Jane Austen is so much more restful than an hour that goes like that on Instagram. And so a lot of it took like intentional study of what is actually restful for me personally, and some radical decisions to cut off things that were distracting and not blessing me.
That's so good.
For me, I've had to take pretty similar.
We've both been pretty
measures.
Radical on our internet.
I think for me, the biggest thing was meditating on Philippians 3:8. It says, "Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ." And so I asked myself, what if I took that verse seriously? What would that look like in my life and in my career? So for me, what it looks like practically is I have zero social media. I rarely, if ever, watch TV. I threw out my Apple TV, not just to do better in school, but also for personal growth and for the sake of my relationship with God in some ways. And over time, he has shown me that this is a better way. Because not only do we worship God by investing more time in our relationship with him, but we can actually worship him and honor him by doing our work with excellence. And if you think about, is my career going to be a ministry? For me, it's like not just my patients, but even to my peers. And the better I am at my job, the more opportunity it opens to share the gospel with my peers, the more they respect you if you're good at what you do. And also God correcting my perspective that work is not bad. Work is a good thing. It was there before sin. And you can find great dignity and purpose in your work and not worship it. But I think to do your job with excellence in medicine and to invest the proper time in your relationship with God and even provision for time for something like marriage or family, eventually you have to make some pretty radical decisions in terms of how you use your time.
I think that it's really, you're kind of beyond your years and that you value time so much at your age, because I think a lot of times people at your age think they have endless time, so they don't view it as something that's limited or needs to be spent wisely. So I think that's such a blessing and such God wisdom that you've sort of moved into that. I also think it's really interesting that your generation, maybe Generation X, is very anti-work. They feel like the work is the worst thing that can happen to you. They feel like it's the most pushed down version of a human is to have to work. And it's very much make money the fast way. Nobody wants to be in the office. But for me, to have a really hard day work and to lay down at night and know you've left it all on the field, you've put it all out there, is so restful. I mean, that's the best rest, is when you've worked hard.
Yeah, I'd recommend anyone struggling with the value of work to read Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. That was that book flipped it for me, and I think it's helped me from both extremes of dishonoring work and saying that it's degrading, but also from idolizing work and working too much.
It has to, right. There's got to be a land somewhere in there that's a little bit more healthy. And we do end up on both sides of that, don't we? That's so wild.
And this is the wisdom of the Sabbath. I mean, God is a God of good, reasonable laws who has our best interest in mind, and
did we talk about, have I told you they did this research? Have I told you about the Sabbath? They've done research, and they researched this sect of religious like Christians who were very committed to the Sabbath, right? And so they did a longitudinal study of this religious group of people who've been committed to the Sabbath for, generations and generations. What they found was that the amount of time in those Sabbaths, if they were added up over a lifetime, was the exact amount of time that they lived past their expected lifetime. So God actually
it's all bonus
them.
time.
It's all actually given back to people. So that rest was clinically given back to them on their life. He doubled the time. And so they were given back that time in their old age. Isn't that wild?
That's wild.
That's very interesting.
I know it's not shocking, but it's like really a cool study.
I think something important to mention as well is that it has seemed in our experience that taking more time for your relationship with God and taking more time to rest, as God has laid it out in the Bible, has benefited our work. But I don't know if that's always guaranteed. Sometimes you might take a real loss, in worldly terms, at least. But I think you have to remember that doing things the way that God provisions them is better. It's better to have more time for God than to go to a busier residency, or it's better to have more time for your relationship with God to make, or if you make an A- rather than an A+.
There's a lot of there's like a lot of life to be lived between an A- and an A+.
Yes.
Have you found that? There's a lot of life right in there.
I'm feeling a lot of parallels between giving your time to the Lord and giving your money to the Lord. We talk about tithing and being generous with your finances to God. And one thing we always preach and we see God do is, like, when you are generous with your money, God is generous back. Like, he's not, a lot of people, it's counterintuitive to what you would think. It's like, oh, well, I need to save this money to pay these bills. If I give it to God to do this thing, I'm not going to pay my bills. And we hear over and over, well, this check came in and da-da-da-da, and God was faithful to pay, give you what you needed. And so hearing you talk about time that way, I'm like, wow, it's the same exact principle of, like, when you give time to God, it feels like, well, I have less time for work. I have less time for family. I have less time for this. But then he ends up giving it back to you in unexpected ways.
Yeah, it's almost like you increase the quality of your time rather than the quantity in that regard. Like, for me, the way I see getting up in the morning and doing a Bible study, so praying and reading God's word, is one, I am tithing my time to God. So the morning is my best study time, but I realize what if I could apply that same brain power to my relationship with God?
It's the first fruits.
It's the first fruits of my day, my time when I'm most attentive, most awake. And I give that to my Bible study and prayer. And then I study. And for me, that's a daily offering to God of, hey, I can't do this on my own. Maybe my grades will be better, but I would never like who I become if I don't prioritize my relationship with God. And I owe it to him out of gratitude for what he's done for me.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
So, okay, so you guys have been through this. I asked you, one of the questions to think about was, what is a moment in med school where you had this huge epiphany, or like that was just this coolest, oh wow, I can't believe moment that you remember that you kind of will always hold on to?
I have one. It's definitely an epiphany. I don't think I'd use the word cool, but because it's mixed with tragedy and
Okay, sure.
But I was on pediatric neurology, which can be a sad place because this is where kids are diagnosed with brain tumors. And I remember there was this little kid who was super cute and started having trouble walking, and then they found a brain tumor on his imaging, and the kid would never be the same again. This tumor would actually likely take his life. And I remember a resident making a comment about the amount of alcohol it would take this weekend to get over this. Like the whole team was just super somber. We just could not believe it. We were trying to figure out why this kid was having trouble walking, and that was the answer. And there was this almost like this agreement that like this is what alcohol is for, almost like in the weekend, so we can forget this. It's interesting, actually. Substance abuse is very common among physicians. I don't know if this is why, but so in our conversations, it became clear that they felt this deep sense that this was not supposed to happen, that there was something wrong or even evil about this brain tumor, that it wasn't supposed to happen. But if we're all just chemicals colliding with each other and everything's random and nothing means anything, that actually doesn't make any sense. That why would it be wrong for these cells to start misbehaving if nothing matters in the end anyway? So they longed to believe that this was wrong, and they had no justification for that. On the other side, they longed for giving hope. They wanted to be able to reassure him and say that everything was going to be okay. They also had no reason to believe that, because death is the end and this kid's going to die way younger than everyone else. And so it feels unfair and there's no hope. And so the only answer is distraction. And I started to be able to articulate how I disagreed with them. And the first one being that this is wrong, and I know it's wrong because God didn't make it this way. We live in a distorted place, and it is wrong. I think evil is the right word, that a child would be so sick. And so I can be angry at that. I can hate this brain tumor and know that I'm correct in that this is not what God designed. And I know that I'm right. And then on the other side, I want to be able to offer hope. And I know that death isn't the end, and that there's a day coming where there won't be brain tumors. And we get to look forward to that. And there's important work to do until then. But so because I know the beginning and the end of the story, I felt this this ability to sit in the middle with people, like in between those two bookends. And instead of having to distract, if you know the beginning and the end of the story, I think you can sit more with pain and not be destroyed by it. And so that was the big epiphany to me, that I do not understand how you would be in a profession like medicine where you're regularly interacting with suffering and death without knowing God and without having a clear understanding of the beginning and the end of the story. So I think that applies to your personal life too. When you're going through something horrible, or your family's going through something terrible, like knowing that it isn't supposed to be this way. It's not how it was designed. It is bad. You're correct in disliking this. And also it's not how it will be in the end.
I think that's a really great thing to speak into when we blame God for the things that happen like the tumor. Why would you let this happen, God? Why would you cause this tumor? You know, and connecting bad things to God when that's
Right.
not how he designed it.
Right. We are in a very strange, brief period where God is allowing some evil things to happen. And that includes me and all my sin. There will be a day where there will be no sin. And the problem is he'll get rid of all the sinners in the process. So there's this brief period where evil is allowed. And that's the time we have to profess faith in Jesus and to be saved. Mm-hmm. But as soon as the Lord reveals himself and gets rid of all this evil, that mechanism for faith disappears because now you're looking at him, you know?
Right.
It's no longer faith. You're just acknowledging him standing in front of you. So that same thing, that same grace that allows me to continue to breathe despite my sin is the same thing that, I don't know, allows brain tumors to slip through, if that makes sense. So that neither of those things will be like that in the end.
Right. There's redemption. There's hope.
Yeah.
That's a really strong, that's a powerful epiphany.
Cool? Is that the right word? Cool.
It's cool. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Jared, how about you?
I think the biggest, they're kind of related, but one was that, and I'll explain this a little bit, but one is that sometimes the doctors need as much care as the patients. And two, and this is related to the first, I chose to do a residency in general surgery, which is notoriously one of the most difficult residencies, 5 years of 6 days a week, long hours each day. But I didn't get there immediately. I came in wanting to do surgery because I had some cool dissection experiences growing up and the TV shows about surgery were cool. But then I got into medical school and then I wanted to do everything on every rotation. I was like, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. Family medicine, anesthesia. And then I'm like, how in the world am I ever going to survive residency? How is my faith going to stay intact? How am I going to prioritize my relationship with God? And so for a while, I was like, no, I can't do this. And I was trying to convince myself not to do surgery because I was like, I won't have time for my relationship with God. And that's the most important thing. And then I spoke with a couple people and kind of came to this realization of not only is it possible in something as demanding as residency to prioritize your relationship with God, but your relationship with God is actually the only way you're ever going to get through this thing and not be damaged on the other side. Wow. Because residency is something that if you are not strong in your faith and you do not have some sort of foundation that is unshakable, you will be damaged on the other side. And I think that's especially true in surgery. Most surgeons are angry and cynical and tired, and their lives are a mess outside of the hospital, so they spend a lot of time in the hospital to avoid them. But then God showed me that, Jared, you can be a light in this field, and your relationship with me is going to be the key to this. And your relationship with me is going to be the key to being able to not only care for your patients, but to also care for your colleagues. Because maybe Gage was alluding to this a little bit, but as a Christian, if you ask yourself the question, what is the well from which I draw to give to my patients? That well is Christ and the love that he shows you. But if you don't have Christ, you ask, what is the well from which I draw to give to my patients? The source of strength or even the motivation to love and care for my patients? I don't know what the answer is. Some like ethical framework that you've arbitrarily constructed, or they give us these like 4 kind of vague ethical principles as kind of our motivation to do good in medicine. Or you just want to make a lot of money, or you actually, in the end, construct your own meaning and your purpose from your skill at caring for your patients. But if you have Christ, you have a whole different source of motivation and power to love and care for your patients. And it's first the love and care that you have received from Christ. And that's the only way that you can make it and actually live on mission, even as you're learning how to be a doctor.
Right.
So
That's good. That's really strong. What okay, let's say that there's some parents listening to the show and they have, I don't know, 9th graders, 7th graders. What is your looking back? And you guys are in a demanding, this is demanding, getting through high school, 4 years of college, 4 years of post, what would be your advice to teenagers, parents, to looking back now, what would you say? Hey, looking forward, this is my best advice for you if you're wanting to go into medicine. If you're wanting something that's this committed, this intense, here's my advice. And it can be practical.
Yeah, the first one is know Jesus or don't go to med school. There's far easier ways to make more money, and so only do it if you're interested in replicating the methods of Jesus, where he would take care of the physical ailments and then talk about more important things afterwards. Yeah, that's first. And then second, we kind of mentioned it earlier, but cultivate the wonder. So it's just a long road. It's a lot of school.
Long road. I thought you would say take Latin, but that's not it.
No.
Is it not take Latin?
If Latin would make you sad, I would not take Latin, because that's the point. Like, you have to. I feel like I'm not particularly brilliant or quicker to solve problems than other people. The advantage I think I have is I really like the science. I just think it's really cool. I just really like talking about
Gage
it.
is really, he's given a lot of science talks at our table. He gets really pumped about science. At some point, he needs to go on the road.
Thanks. I think that's been super motivating because I don't have to sit down and go, okay, come on, I got to figure this out now. I have a question about how this works. This is really cool. And so
I like cultivating wonder. I think that's a really great, I mean, I obviously the Jesus first, but the wonder thing, I think it's really good.
Yeah, I would say for parents with kids, if they are interested in medicine, or if you want them to be interested in medicine, help them develop a vision for what it's like to be a doctor, if that's possible. And then I would say also help them to become academically independent from you as quickly as possible. Meaning at some point you have to stop telling them to do their work, and the earlier the better. Because in college, at some point, and 100% in medical school, no one's going to hold your hand academically anymore. So you have to find the internal motivation to put in the hours to study a lot and to be good at what you do. I think that'd be my biggest tip for parents. For kids, I just say, like, the thing I always say is, like, you got to want it. Like, if the end goal is enough to get you through where you're currently at, then you're good. Because there's going to be some long nights, some delirious moments at 2 a.m. where you're like crying, laughing with your friend, making jokes about organic chemistry molecules. And
We've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
And then there's going to be some questioning, some really deep soul searching. Just a brief, I have to share this little anecdote of how the end has to be enough. During my first semester of medical school, I was like really struggling. I was like really questioning. I'm like, wow, this is so hard. And it was to the point where I'm like, do I need to go find a female medical resident and then offer to be her stay-at-home husband? Because this is really hard. I don't know if I got what it takes. And so I was like, I'm like, may or may not legitimately be considering this option at the moment. But then I was like, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. We're not going to do that, Jared. That would be unwise.
We're not going to do that, Jared.
But yeah, and then focus is important, especially freshman year of college is not a time to mess around. That is a time to like crush all of your classes and bolster your GPA for the harder classes to come. So focus early on is important because it's only getting harder to get into med school, because I got to help on the interview committee for medical school applicants. And I'm like, all these kids are smarter than me. I'm like, how in the world did I get in? I'm not as good as these people. I was like, wow,
How did I get in?
how did I get in? I'm like, thank you, God.
Knowing the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this has been great talking to you guys and hearing about your walk and discipline and advice. This has been fantastic. So we have this last question. It's just kind of throw in there. It's 25 years down the road and you've decided to take some time off and you're taking a break and you're going to get to spend, I don't know, 15 hours a week on your favorite hobby. What is that?
And
how
she'll
many
go
years?
first. In
Say 25
years.
Your favorite hobby.
This is
How much
such, and we answered this too. We answered as well.
we
15
answer
hours a
first.
15 hours a week?
Yeah,
15.
maybe
Become world
10 hours a
champion.
week on this hobby. What is it?
Do you have one? You don't have to say how old you'll be, but you won't be retired by then, right?
Let
Like
me
you'll still be
say,
working.
the hobby question is coming into mind so often now because I'm about to be an empty nester, and so I don't know if I want to be into speed puzzles where I'm solving puzzles. Although
Like
going to hotels and
jigsaw
your
puzzles.
jigsaw
Yeah.
puzzles, they
Wow.
do 500 count puzzles.
Yeah, they have
and
contests. Yeah.
They have contests and getting
Where
a partner.
there's a huge like conference room or like banquet hall, and there's like all the same puzzle, and it's like ready, set,
Wow.
go.
And they
like,
throw,
it's-
and these people are so coordinated.
Yeah.
They like one of them rips the bag, the other one flips it. They
It's
all
a
know.
partner activity.
They're teams.
You and Andy.
and
could,
they.
like-
Oh,
yeah, I don't
wow.
know. I don't
who would
know
you
if
choose as your
Andy-
partner?
Well,
Are there like
Leah
old people that
Dixon-
take 6 hours and
There's some
enjoy the ride?
There's
as they put
and
together?
I've watched videos, and these people are incredibly fast. And it's
Wow.
500. It's a 500 piece puzzle in less than 30 minutes.
Wow.
And it's just like one of them's flipping the pizzas, one of them's pulling up the edges,
Wow.
one of them's making the matches. So there's part of me that thinks that I may like to go down that road. I think that's kind of fun.
Have you been
so
studying
funny.
strategy for this yet?
Not yet. Mostly
Okay.
just watching TikTok videos.
Wow.
But the other thing I really love doing that pulls me into such a great like space mentally is painting. I love painting. So I think I could, if I had goal, like what I could do with paint, if I had everything and I had the easel out and some
Wow.
good challenges, I love to paint.
Wow.
What about you, Justin?
Well, those are two great answers. And I'm trying to think, like, what do I want to do in 25 years that's like fun, I guess, for me? I think there's my wife is this way as well. More my wife than me. I think both of us would love to be like good at gardening and taking care of flower beds and like having like the yard, but we don't have the time to learn about it. We don't have the patience to deal with it. But it feels like in 25 years when I have no kids, like I could be the yard that has like the beautiful flowers in bloom right now and like that, but it just takes a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. Like
It's
you
a lot of
either
work and a lot
pay
of
somebody to
knowledge.
do it or you work hard and know a lot about it. And I don't have the time to learn about it or
I
do
love
it.
the good yard. I
But
think
to me, that's
a
like a
sign.
25 year down the road. I think
That's
it's a
good.
great aspiration.
I just realized at 25 years, I'm probably not going to be solving a problem. Probably going to be on a breathing tube. But let's say,
No.
like,
If
let's
you do
say
your
five-
Sabbath,
hospice,
if you do your
not the
Sabbath, you get those
ICU.
hours
I
back.
get those hours back.
Get those hours back.
Okay, how about you guys?
So I read this cool autobiography about this guy named Christopher Parkening. He was like this world-class classical guitarist who got everything he wanted, and then he discovered it was all empty. And then he became a Christian. And then he dedicated the rest of his performing career to honoring Christ with his classical guitar. And so I got inspired and I had a lot of time in fourth year. So I violated one of my rules, which is when you have a lot of free time in medical school, don't start a new hobby because that's not an accurate representation. So, but naturally I broke it and I bought a classical guitar and I started practicing. But then I realized I wasn't content with practicing like 30 minutes or an hour a day. So I started increasing the time. And this was about a month span. And I'm like, I got to stop. I'm going to get too obsessed with this. And then I'm going to like,
Start your residency and not have time for it anymore.
start my residency and
walked
not
out,
have
he's a
practiced
guitarist
medicine
now.
and be really good at classical guitar, but not at medicine when I
think
start
it's-
residency.
That's really cool that you would
So-
want to put that intensity into classical
Yes, because
guitar.
playing I love music. Music is one of the things that convinces me God is real somehow. Like objectively, like when I hear a beautiful piece of music, I'm like, there's something more than just us in this life. And But the problem is beautiful music is really hard to play. Like the pieces that sound so beautiful are extremely difficult. So I would need 15 hours a day to play the beautiful music that I want to play.
So you would jump right into the back into the classical guitar.
Yes, I would send
He
it.
dusted off.
So Gage, I feel like I feel like there's some things we think.
Talking the mic on a show.
Okay, Gage, what's
I have two thoughts. One is something I've always wanted to do and have never done it. In high school, I wanted to do it. In college, I wanted to do it. And both times I failed. Maybe I can do it when if I have kids one day and they're older. I've always wanted to start a Rubik's Cube club.
Wow.
So I love Rubik's Cubes, have a huge collection. I can solve the 3x3 pretty quick. My fastest is like 11 seconds, average like 19 seconds.
That's ridiculous.
So I've always wanted to have a Rubik's Cube club where the first half of the meeting is like a lecture on parity errors in the 4x4 or how to do look ahead and like the CFOP method, advancing from the beginner method. And then the second half of the club get together is just races where you do the same scramble for two different people and you have tournaments and it just sounds so fun. I wanted to do it in high school, wanted to do it in college. Now I imagine doing it with my kids as like a church ministry, as a way to get in like nerdy kids who wouldn't come to the church otherwise. And you just get them to think big. I think the Rubik's Cube teaches you a lot about how you can do things that look impossible at first, but if you sit down and figure it out slowly, that you could do something that you used to think was impossible.
Wow.
So probably that would want to do it with a big crew of kids. Second thing I thought of also would require a big crew of kids. My wife grew up playing in handbell choirs. We even had a handbell choir when she walked down the aisle.
It was so beautiful.
Wow.
that
So
was really beautiful.
huge crew of kids. Put the littlest one on the biggest bell and have a bell choir that's like the Van Trapp family from the Sound of Music.
I can't wait to
And just have
see
like
Sarah
playing the
listen to
offertories.
this episode and she knows this is coming.
That's so
She
funny.
knows the handbell part's coming, right?
They have handbell duets, where each person holds two bells in each hand, which you would think would be super basic, but the complexity of music with just those 8 bells is incredible. I've been wanting to get into it with Sarah. We haven't had the time yet, but maybe if we have time and we have a crew, we could play some cool music with handbells.
I love that.
That's really
That's
cool.
really cool.
Man, I'm so glad you guys got to come and hang out with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
This was
Yeah,
fun.
thank you for having
Yeah.
us.
We love your setup. Admire your
this was a lot of
podcast.
fun.
This is awesome.
Yeah, in the last 5 minutes, the air finally kicked on, so thank God for that.
Yeah, I was sweating a little bit.
Yeah, well, we all were. But I just want to thank y'all for joining us and for watching. If you enjoyed this, please send it to somebody that you think would also be encouraged. Really, really incredible things talked about, especially about like, giving your time to God and making your plan to like work on your relationship with Him and make it a priority, even in the hardest, most difficult seasons of your lives, which is really encouraging to hear. Send it to somebody. If you have somebody you want us to talk to, email us at podcast@cityrise.org. Rate, review, subscribe. If you're watching YouTube, all these things are free. We'd love for you to do that to help us get the word out about our show.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you guys. And thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you've had an almost amazing time on the Almost Amazing podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Almost Amazing podcast from the City Rise Network based in Houston, Texas. City Rise is a partnership of church campuses, nonprofits, and missionaries devoted to lifting our city and the world by generously giving the gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information or to find a church campus close to you in the Houston area, visit cityrise.org.